3 and then 4. Yeah, so the beads on top will be worth 4. And it's base 8 because it's octal. And let's see what we got. I think this works. Let's see if we can put, yeah, so there's 7 in that column, 8 64s. 30, yeah, we just made an octal abacus. So the idea that the kids can explore their own ideas of representation as well as being exposed to real world. Now let me take it a step further. So I was working with this group of teachers in a little town in Paraguay called Cocape. And they saw this and they said, well, you know, we're exploring fractions with our kids. And how do you do fractions on an abacus? And they invented a new abacus. The teachers invented this abacus. This is cool. This is an invention of some teachers in a rural Paraguay. So these are just the whole numbers, and these are fractions. Now, the thing that's cool about this is they weren't the first ones to ever come up with the idea of fractions. The Russians did that. The Russians have an abacus, I'll show you, I skipped it in my demo, of one column only has 4 beads, and those are for quarter ruples. But they were the first ones to sort of extend it like this. But the other thing they did, which is really cool, is they made it so that you could subtract. So now I can take this and I can subtract that. And you can't do that. I mean, you can subtract in an abacus, but subtracting fractions of different bases doesn't work real well on an abacus. But they invented this in Paraguay. So the idea is, again, not just that they invented, but they figured out that they could invent. Okay, the context in which they were working was one that allowed them to, you know, make the connection that invention's actually something available to us too. We don't have to just have received wisdom. So if I come back to here, all right, I'm getting close to the end and then we'll have time for questions or demos. One of the things that's happened that's kind of cool, and I didn't mention any of the numbers yet. There are about 2 million kids using sugar around the world. About 75% of those are in Latin America. Every single child in Uruguay has one of these, running sugar. Every single kid. And a few things that were kind of interesting that happened when they did that. It's been for a couple of years now. One is that they discovered a bunch of kids they didn't know about. And now all these kids that they didn't know about are not only in school, but they're also part of the national health system, things like that. That was kind of good. But the other thing is that they've sort of established this culture now in Uruguay around using the computer, and the kids are doing all sorts of stuff we didn't ever expect. So for example, there are kids that are using the computer to inventory the cattle on their farms. There's kids who've set up businesses around a variety of different things. This is some robotics. The kids turn the laptop into a robot. Who needs Lego when you can just, you know, build your own? I met online a 12-year-old from Uruguay, and he was sort of bumping up against some sugar problems. And we have an IRC application so the kids can pop in and talk directly to the developers. And so it turns out there's a 12-year-old who's written about a half a dozen activities for sugar from Uruguay. It's starting to happen. Took a couple of years to really prime the pump, but the pump is primed and it's starting to happen. And when the president of Uruguay found out, he said with a big smile, "We have hackers now," which is pretty cool. The teachers are inventing things, the kids are inventing things. It really is got a life of its own now, and you know, that's really what we set out to do. We set up Sugar. Sugar Labs it's a nonprofit foundation. It's a 100% volunteer organization. The woman from the Red Cross this morning was bragging about how they only have a 9% overhead. Sugar Labs is a 0% overhead. It's easy to have a 0% overhead when you have 0 revenue, too. So we have no money, so we spend no money. It's all happening by volunteers around the world. So the software is free as in freedom and also free as in price. And what we've done, though, is we've set up a structure so that around the world, these different organizations can do sugar any way they need to do sugar. So some of the sugar satellites, and we call it sugar labs plural because there are multiple sugar labs around the world. Some of them are for-profit, providing services to governments or to local people. Some of them are run by kids. But the idea that there's sort of this shared core in the middle is important. Now, I haven't talked about free software very much yet because I sort of live and breathe free software. I don't remember to talk about free software. But free software was fundamental to this project, and fundamental to this project in two ways. Okay, good. The red light's on. I have 3 minutes, I think. One way in which it was fundamental is that without free software and the free software community and all the wonderful tools that free software provides, we never could have done sugar. But sugar actually happened because the base is so rich now that you can build anything, and very quickly. But the other reason why free software is so important to the project is because free software is a culture, not just a technology. And change is about culture, not about technology. Learning is about culture, not just about technology. And the culture of free software is a culture of sharing and collaboration, but it's also a culture of critique. And people who work in free software write code, they critique code, and they also critique free software. So they're constantly in this discussion about what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, how can we do it better, how can we do it different. And it's the closest that I've ever come to a meritocracy, because the bottom line is show me the code. You have a better idea, don't tell me about your better idea, show me the code. And so there's this attitude about learning that's so rich in the world of free software. And it's that attitude that, you know, I can do it, I'm not going to just depend on getting, learning's not a service. It's not something you subscribe to from the phone company. Learning's something you do. And free software is about doing and about engaging in a critical dialogue about what you're doing. And what could be a richer learning environment than that? So free software is the magic sauce that makes sugar happen. And here's sort of the URL, sugarlabs.org. You can download sugar. It runs in a VM on any computer these days. You can run it natively in almost any Linux distro these days. And try it. Again, we've got lots of kids, high school kids, university students all developing for sugar. If you teach a computer science class, teach your computer science class with sugar. It's Python, great language to learn in. And when your students do something, they're not just doing it as an academic exercise, but they're touching the lives of millions of kids. What better motivation can that be for hacking? So there it is. That's my email if you want to get in touch. And thank you very much. And did I run out of time? Let's see. I got 1 more minute. So. And I think we have a few minutes between talks, so I'm here for questions or demos or whatever. I'm sorry, what? Where did the money come from for the hardware? Well, the money comes from all different sources in different places. So, for example, in Uruguay is actually a relatively wealthy country, and they just said, we're going to do this, and they did it. They bought the hardware themselves. In Peru, not as wealthy a country, some of it the government paid for, some of it's come in through foundations and the like. When I was at One Laptop Per Child, we raised a lot of money to give hardware to countries. So we provided tens of thousands of laptops to Rwanda, Mongolia, a few other places through just raising the money. So a lot of different ways of doing it. Yeah, well, there actually is a little bit of this going on in South Carolina. Trying to remember his name, but if you email me, I'll put you in touch with the people in South Carolina doing this. But it is happening here. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
There's some speculation, you and I were talking earlier about the next model. I have heard through people like Caroline and so forth that it's going to become available to U.S. schools very shortly.
Well, I mean, the laptop itself has always been available to U.S. schools. The problem is got to do with volume. Okay, so the OLPC, when I left OLPC to start Sugar Labs in 2006, there were still less than 20 employees, soup to nuts. We designed and built and manufactured and distributed and supported a laptop, the first netbook computer ever made. Less than 20 people. Plus we wrote Sugar. Plus we, did stuff like had people worry about travel and payroll and all that kind of stuff. And just a teeny little organization. But again, because of free software, you can do a lot with a little. But what we didn't have is we didn't have a sales force. We didn't have somebody who could go around. There are more school districts in the United States than the rest of the world combined. It's a very fragmented market. So we didn't have any way of actually reaching out in the United States to actually service it. So we've done very little here, not because we don't want to or we don't think kids here deserve this. But actually that was one of the reasons why I started Sugar Labs, because Sugar Labs is completely agnostic about the hardware. Sugar will run on anything, and in fact it'll run on old decrepit hardware that's already in your school. You can repurpose your machines that barely run Windows 2000 and they run Sugar like a dream. So you can take these old labs that are useless and actually do something useful with them. You can put the software on a USB key, give it to the kids, they can take it home or to the library or wherever they can get their hands on a computer, boot the computer either in a VM or boot the computer off the USB key. Doesn't do anything to the computer itself. They're borrowing the computer by having the USB key. So there are a lot of ways of doing this for a lot less than buying every kid a laptop. Now, if you're from a wealthy state like Maine, you can afford to buy kids laptops. But, for the rest of us, it's whatever we can get our hands on, and the software is free, available. The only thing we ask is you contribute back your ideas in the spirit of the GPL. Any other questions? Or again, my email was up there. It's walter@sugarlabs.org. And thank you.